Thomas Sorber entered the year as a notable high school prospect, but wasn't looked at as a clear one and done. But his hot start and continued production helping turn around a Georgetown team that hadn't won over 10 games since 2021 made that more of a reality. He's a 6'10 big with a 7'6 wingspan, which is good for the second longest in the class, and he put up about 15, 9, and 2 with 3.5 stocks a game as a freshman, showing an intriguing defensive impact and upside as an interior scorer and passer. Now Sorber has some important questions to answer in how effective he is in certain roles, how functional an athlete he is on both ends, and then teams will want to be sure the foot injury won't hinder his success, but he checks a lot of boxes for a modern big, and that upside could land him as high as the lottery. Now Sorber may not be at the very top of the list, but he's at least in the conversation for most impactful defenders in the class. Georgetown allowed just 92 points per 100 possessions with him on the floor, but were 26 points worse when he left, both of which were marks as good as anyone in the country, and he made his presence felt most at the rim. He's not your traditional super bouncy or wiry athlete or just massive rim deterrent like a Edey or Klingon, but his timing and ability to be in the right spots was as good as it gets. He averaged 2 blocks a game with a block percentage over 7. Opponents shot just 57% at the rim with him on the floor, which is a great mark, and he was generally tough to score on the interior and being posted up. He also has very good hands and posted one of the best steal rates for any big that's been drafted in recent years, and he does a good job reading plays, getting deflections, and moving around a little bit across the court. Now in the pick and roll, he's at his best in more of a drop, but should settle in playing to the level more eventually, especially with the type of length that he has to contest shots. But he wins by being in the right spots, being able to contest and tip passes on the retreat, and being physical when needed. Now he's got room for growth as an athlete in ground coverage and is generally more mobile than he is super agile. He's not someone that'll run full switch schemes, which we'll talk about more later, but he can at least stick in plays. Overall, the defensive activity, rim protection, abilities to finish possessions on the glass, and just be in the right spots make him one of the more compelling fives in the class defensively, and someone that has quite a bit of value off of that alone.
Yeah, there's got to be cleaner screens. One, you can't anticipate.
Yes. Nice cut.
The hands at the last result. So this is not a Georgetown team that's looking at their
own. It's just they're flying around, and that's his kid right there, just playing smart, not even trying to chimp the basket.
Dynamics in college basketball, and we talked about this transformative versus transactional. Well, every kid on the floor right now understands how important this rivalry is. Old school Big East picks up the foul. Corey Floyd had a nice game. Providence coming up. Was rejection last thing for the arrow. Sorber with a handoff. He's going to be able to pop. Let's see if he gets that going early. Travel. That's like Joseph. Tail off in practice, they'll allow you to shoot those in games. And there's Sorber.
DeVries looking tired, take the lead.
Way I mentioned, the transition defense gave up 85 to Albany in a win on Tuesday. 15 back. As Sorber missed moments later, the personal. George Burke's off the bench. Davis patiently waiting.
Screen bodies against Sorber.
Stripped right now. The fifth-year Lampkin and the first-year Sorber. The Georgetown bench is standing up. Nick Cooley's screaming for offensive fouls.
LA this summer training against a lot of pros, so would love to see his development offensively and defensively.
Telfort, quiet game for Butler's leading scorer. Can't bank it in.
Bring it down, show the referees his hands, and that's a nice defensive play.
Hey, like Greg McDermott calls the team. John, but they have plenty.
Now the offense is more of a question mark big picture, but he's still got plenty to work with and potentially affect the game in more than one way. He's most naturally going to finish plays and work off of others. He had quite a bit of success playing in the dunker spot and operating as sort of a cutter in the half court, kind of roaming around the paint or executing off a cross screen. Now, Georgetown didn't have the most gifted playmakers this year, but Sorber did a good job of converting the opportunities that they did get him, as he shot nearly 70% at the rim and got to the free throw line at a good rate as well. Now, I was initially pretty confused as to why his pick and roll numbers were so poor, because it didn't stand out as much in the film, but the pick and pops are included in that number on Synergy, and he's just not good at that right now, and that drags things down pretty significantly. But he is a solid screener with a big enough frame to open up lanes when he makes contact, and he showed flashes of nuance on Gortats and seals a few times throughout the year, and that's always intriguing to see from anyone, but especially a big that's only 18, 19 years old. Now, he still has his limitations as a lob threat and athlete that may cap him here, and we'll get into that more a little later, but he's at least capable of giving you value with his touch and footwork in traffic. And then, while teams of course don't post up a ton in the NBA today, Sorber did most of his damage there. He was efficient, and the footwork, physicality, and ability to attack quickly are translatable to a lot of different situations, and he has a budding face-up game too, though that'll be more of a work in progress. So even though he may not have the most traditional tools above the rim, and I wish we would have got to see a slightly bigger sample of him in the Big East, he's still got a good enough combo of physicality, footwork, and touch to finish plays in NBA spacing.
To see where the switches are going to be.
Hoyas ran flex 6 times against Creighton. They converted on 4 of them.
99.5% man-to-man. The Hoyas will play a little bit of zone. That's a great...
Now it's trimmed to 10. Here's Peavy. Down to Sorber. Tommy boy!
Bounce on the floor. Only the 3rd time this year he's played for Syracuse. Sorber, a rim rocker.
Georgetown won just 9 games last year, trying to turn it around here.
Into Sorber.
Slither get there. Inside-outside threat.
And you know, he's not afraid. I mean, he had 16 against Alabama the other night, too. So in the big game.
Mulready bounces into Sorber. Faces up, falls away over screening.
He's taking a few off the boards now for the Orange. Clapping his hands in the face of Sorber. And a fresh huge swing. Personnel-wise in this game as Sorber goes to work on Brooks.
No, last year Butler beat Georgetown twice. Brooks had 29 points in both games.
Sorber all the way to
be able to be in position and never foul.
Sorber goes into the paint, left side off the glass. It's good.
That's a tough shot from Elijah Moore. Contested in the mid-range.
Two defenders able to get stops. Loose ball.
Malik Mack will take it himself. Does not draw iron, and it's a shot clock violation.
The other part of Sorber's offense that makes him such an intriguing piece is his passing. Now, he's probably not the type that'll evolve into a true hub unless the scoring becomes something that's just very difficult to stop, but his ability to connect the dots, give you continuity, and quickly identify the open man stood out, and he put up an impressive assist rate for a freshman big. He's a natural on DHOs and can flow right into ball screens, and that should be one of the more translatable pieces of his game. He does a good job in the middle of defenses too, whether that's playing high-low or finding off-ball shooters and cutters, or even operating inside zones too. He's also got some upside as a short roll decision maker. He can make quick decisions and should play well in advantage situations in time, and this is part of the reason I'm still fairly in on him as a roller despite being a mostly below the rim guy. And then he can operate out of the post and did a good job of reading doubles and even driving baseline to find the open man. I feel like we don't talk quite enough about how important all of this is to a Bigs game today. If you don't have some of this, you got to be one of the very best play finishers and rim protectors to find success, and that's backed up pretty strongly statistically when it comes to projecting prospects. And Sorber has still had his moments where he's threw the ball around a little bit, and the usage was probably higher than I would have anticipated him to have this year. But even if he isn't Sabonis, Bam, or Şengün, he's at least someone you can guarantee will be useful here and could develop into an inarguable plus.
Sorber. Oh, the no-look pass from the freshman has essentially been all G.
Another set where they kind of lift everybody to the foul line and let him run to the post.
He skips to Peavy. 2-second difference between shot and game. Big possession here for the Hoyas. Sorber with a kick. Off the fake, Williams back to Sorber. Thomas Sorber.
Threes tonight. We'll be in really good shape. Well, he has 3 so far. Williams from 18.
And you are being tested. Good pass.
Now, the part of his offensive game that somewhat muddied his projection is the lack of explosiveness and vertical spacing that would make him a much more projectable play finisher. That's the role or job that he most easily slots into because he isn't Nas Reed with the ball or quite as gifted as a playmaker in general. But being a bit undersized, he doesn't have great quick twitch and close off of 1 or 2 feet and doesn't beat defenses over the top in traffic. Now, he's still got more than enough to be serviceable, right? Like, he finished 70% of the rim, he's got extremely long arms, solid touch, he's not afraid of physicality, and has solid footwork in close. Those are all pluses, but when you watch him against an NBA caliber backup big like Kalkbrenner or some of the other length he went up against, or even just his ability to elevate in tight spaces, it just wasn't quite there in a way that you'd want it to be. Again, there's still a possibility that he can get by and maybe he improves enough as an athlete or even adds a push shot in a lane that completely offsets some of this, but I think this is something that could either hold him back or he'll have to have as a point of emphasis heading into the league. And then staying with the offense here, as much as I like the volume of attempts that he took from 3 and some of the face-ups that we talked about, he shot just 16% from deep and isn't the most mechanically excellent or fluid at the moment. I still wouldn't rule out the possibility that he shoots it because he was extremely confident, he's got a solid base and was relatively okay from the free throw line and had good moments from the mid-range, but it's something that he'll need to develop further over the next several years because I think there's a lot of coaches out there that wouldn't have even allowed him to shoot as many as he did this year. Now, if he does shoot it, it immediately gives him a ton more value as a floor spacing 5 and also someone that could at least get away with playing the 4 in the right context. We'll talk about some of the difficulties that could be there on the other end in a second, but as long as you can shoot it, you can find other solutions for matchup issues just a little easier than we think on paper, especially in the regular season, as long as the motor and feel is there. So I wouldn't bank on it being a part of his game, but whoever picks him will at least have this in mind as a potential long-term plus.
To go along with a couple of blocks for the freshman big man. On the back pass, almost went to the backcourt. Sorber turnaround. He's got
so much energy to do the job down here as well. Sorber responds.
We discussed who he is defensively, and I have quite a bit of confidence he'll make a positive impact here, but one of the main things that's given me pause about him as like that next tier defender or even overall prospect is some of his perimeter defense. Now, like we mentioned, he's a decent mover, but the moments he was tested in space or attack didn't always go well, which you expect to an extent, but for a big that's just 6'10" in shoes, it starts to become a bit more important to have than what he currently provides. It takes him a minute to plant and change direction. If he got closer on contests, he'd be more susceptible to blow-bys, and then he had some strange closeouts where he kind of accepted his fate early. Some of this will be improved, just cutting out the ones that he knows that he can execute better, and I think it's important to note that he does project well as a center despite being undersized, so there's not those same tweener questions there, but if we're talking scheme versatility and switches or playing the 4, he just doesn't move quite well enough out there for me to be confident in that being a defining part of who he is.
You know, you got to give the Hoyas credit. Their half-court defense has been really
no doubt
good.
They're slowly but surely under Ed Cooley. This would be a significant win even if these teams are down. Freeman is smothered
as we get along further into this game.
Sometimes it's like osmosis just being around.
Now, the last spot here would just be some injury questions. He injured his left foot against Butler in mid-February, which requires surgery and has kept him out until recently, where he's reportedly starting to ramp back up to make a full recovery sometime in these next couple weeks and months. That's likely the reason he weighed in a little heavier than usual too, so I wouldn't put too much weight into that, no pun intended, but there's always going to be some level of question on the severity for lower body injuries for bigs and if that could hinder him in the long term. Now, I'm not a doctor and I don't know the specifics here, so I just can't give you an opinion on that, but as long as it checks out and he's headed in the right direction, I don't think a short-term injury should affect his stock too much, especially if he doesn't project to miss time in his rookie year for it. But it's at least worth mentioning, and we'll see if anything else comes from that. Now, Sorber will likely end up somewhere in the top 20 with a couple late lottery spots potentially having enough interest for him to land there. Offensively, I think he'll operate as a mostly play finisher who can make a play for himself and connect the dots as a passer from the 5 spot. And if he does eventually shoot it, it'll open up more there. Now, defensively, I think he's going to be super impactful. He'll likely be closer to an anchor 5 than anything else, and should be someone that'll play to the level in the pick and roll, but probably won't be swift enough to be a switch big or quite the mobility to keep up at the 4. It's hard to bank on athletic improvement as the swing area, but if he can improve there and the shot comes along, those are what I think could take him from a contributor to like a top 8 to 10 big and high level starter guy. Fit wise, I like Chicago and Houston in that late lottery range. It's two very different situations, but I think his defense, feel, and passing will be welcome there. OKC would be intriguing as a long-term piece in that front court, and then Minnesota and Indiana stand out as we get into that late teens and early 20s range that he could still end up in. Now, comparison-wise, it was kind of difficult to think of some that match up well with him. He's not quite as agile defensively as Wendell Carter Jr., but I think there's a lot of similarities between them, especially if Sorber takes threes. There's also a little non-explosive Jalen Duren in there, maybe some Kevon Looney, but no others I'm a huge fan of because he's definitely unique. Thomas Sorber's combination of defensive impact, passing, and upside as an interior scorer make him one of the best bets to contribute at the 5. I think the athleticism could limit him in some ways, especially because he is 6'10", but I would heavily consider him if I was a team in the late lottery, and would be pretty excited if I was able to get him in the late teens or 20s as long as he's healthy.